Thank you for joining us today for our Facebook Live. I'm Julia Marvin. I'm the marketing manager here at Jefferson Center, and I am so excited to be joined by Sarah Greenbaum today. And Sarah is the community liaison for Jefferson Center's Colorado Spirit program. And the Colorado Spirit program, it's a COVID-19 relief and mental health support program. And so with COVID cases continuing to spike across Colorado, schools are going back to fully remote learning. And so for many parents and guardians, this means being part-time teachers on top of being full-time parents. And so I'm really excited because Sarah is going to talk with us a little bit today about how you can build routines and be successful when you're doing learning at home. So before we get started, a little bit about Colorado Spirit. It's a community-driven program here at Jefferson Center that's aimed at providing COVID-19 relief and mental health support across Colorado with a specific focus on Jefferson County, Clear Creek County, and Gilpin County. Excuse me. Colorado Spirit offers free and confidential and virtual support. They have trained crisis counselors who are here to listen and provide support around the feelings that you might have about life during the pandemic, such as worry, sadness, hopelessness, or anger. It can be really tough to juggle parenting responsibilities, and on top of everything else, it's also important to take care of yourself both physically and emotionally to avoid burnout. And so Sarah's here to talk to us about establishing routines to help set you and your learners up for success. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so to start, can you tell us a little bit about parental burnout and what that looks like?
Sure. So parental burnout is really an exhaustion syndrome, and it can look a little bit different for everyone. So sometimes it looks like exactly that, just extremely exhausted and really tired all the time. And sometimes it can look like being emotionally distanced from yourself or your children or any of your loved ones, and that can result in feeling like an ineffective parent as well. Some of the symptoms commonly for parents are nightmares, ongoing irritability, anger, frustration, moodiness that's out of the norm, appetite or sleep issues. I really like to emphasize this one because sometimes I think it's common to think lack of sleep or overeating are a symptom, but it's really just anything out of the norm. So maybe you're under eating, maybe you're eating at midnight and you used to eat at 5 o'clock. So anything that's kind of out of the norm with appetite and sleep. And withdrawal. Withdrawal is a really big one with parental burnout from, like I said, your kids or any of your loved ones.
Yeah, and like we talked about, I know I've talked with a lot of my friends who are parents, and they're definitely experiencing that because it's been tough, having kids home all day and trying to juggle their virtual learning in addition to working a full-time job and also maintaining the household. And so, do you have any tips for self-care for parents to kind of help avoid that that burnout that they might be experiencing?
Yeah, kind of the first one I like to emphasize is if you already have a self-care plan, keep it. That can be so hard to say with parents, like you said, being parents and also at-home teachers and sometimes nurses and also cleaning the house and all of the things that are kind of on their ever-revolving to-do list. But these self-care routines that you already have are important and they have been working, so there's no need to fix it. Maybe you can adjust it a little bit, but whatever that may be, keep it. So if you lock yourself in the bathroom for 5 minutes while you take a shower for some peace and quiet, keep doing it. You need that 5 minutes, just keep it up. It doesn't have to be like some extended plan that you keep adding to that to-do list. Just kind of keeping those self-care things that you're already doing. If you don't have anything for self-care that you're doing, I highly encourage parents to carve out some time to find something that they can do for self-care. And like I said, it doesn't have to be this 30-minute or an hour self-care routine per se. It can just be 5 or 10 minutes to really enjoy that cup of coffee before your kids wake up, or to fall asleep to watching your favorite show. And then I like to recommend exercise, of course. Kind of a better way to look at exercise, I think, is in terms of physical wellness. So instead of thinking that you have to add that hour run-in all the time, every day, maybe you just need to get vertical and take a nap for your physical wellness. That can be flexible. So whatever your physical wellness looks like for you, to relax your body or to energize your body is wonderful self-care. Communication is also really helpful for self-care. Sometimes just venting or talking about it and feeling understood with a partner can do a world of wonders. And finally, I like to encourage parents to choose their battles wisely, which can be hard, but sometimes it's just not worth the emotional energy for anyone to get upset about something that might just be a little thing. And that's so much easier said than done, but it's really worth considering your battles.
Yeah, that's a good point. That yeah, is it something that seems like how much is it going to matter in the long run for some of these things? That's a great point about self-care too, because I know sometimes it can feel really overwhelming, to be practicing self-care habits, because sometimes we think about it being like, oh well, I need to take an hour-long bubble bath, or I need to go on a hour-long run or something like that. But it's great to know that you can even do something as small, 5 to 10 minutes can really make an impact, because there's usually everyone can carve out 5 to 10 minutes to do something. So that seems like it's a lot easier to more manageable. So that's great. So kind of talking a little bit, COVID-19 has obviously created a lot of changes in our lives, and it keeps changing. And it seems like once we kind of get used to something, then everything gets a little bit upended. I feel like schools is kind of a good example of, we were, remote for so many months and then went back to school, and then now we're, looking at being remote again. And so can you talk a little bit about why some of the ways that routines are important for maintaining consistency when everything else is a little bit uncertain?
Sure. Generally, I think that routines are important because they create structure for you and your children. They can help you both feel a sense of accomplishment, and they can let us and people around us know how we're doing. So, with a sense of structure, we can know when our day begins and ends. And that will kind of allow for us and our children to prioritize what we need to get done, or maybe what we'd really like to get done that day. And completing those priorities also helps us feel accomplished, and that's good for anyone. And that can be in any context. Like maybe your goal for the day is just to fold your laundry. Great, that can be your sense of accomplishment for the day. It doesn't have to be something that's, a big work project or school project. It can just be kind of getting your house in order. They also can let us know how we're doing. So even those small things like getting dressed are really important parts of our day. And I know since the pandemic, many of us have taken a little bit more of a liberal approach to getting ready for the day. So maybe we look really great on our top half and really not so great on our bottom half. And although that's a subtle change, it can have a really big impact, especially for kids. I hear a lot from parents that if they don't kind of help their kids get ready for the day and at least get into a new pair of pajamas or a clean pair of pajamas, their kids want to nap all day, or they feel sluggish because they know what pre-pandemic the pajamas maybe meant. And finally, they let us let others around us know how we're doing. So before the pandemic, if you didn't show up for work, people probably worried. If your kids didn't show up for school, people definitely worried. So people are concerned about everyone's well-being right now, and even just showing up for that optional Zoom meeting that happens every day, if you can show up for 5 minutes once a week, great. People will know that you're hanging in there and that you're doing well.
That's interesting. Probably something, I know I haven't thought of is, like you were saying, that even those subtle shifts in routine can really have that bigger impact. And so that's a really interesting way to look at it of, what was your routine before, and, what elements, noticing the differences and also trying to get back to, some semblance of that, or at least, touching on the points of the why behind some of the routines. That's really helpful. So my next question is that, creating routines isn't always easy. Do you have any tips for parents about building routines?
Sure. So with routines, they look different for all of us. So my hope is that out of all these things, maybe one thing will be something that works for your household. But it is hard to build a routine and then rebuild a routine and then rebuild a routine through the pandemic. So the big ones that I like to start with are starting with the big picture. So kind of beginning with your overall large block schedule of what a typical day in your household looks like. So if you know that your kids and you are both home all day, every day, that's fine. But maybe you also want to block off an hour in the evening for dinner or for a TV show you all like to watch together. So kind of starting with that big picture is good, and can be really helpful in just giving everybody something to kind of be intentional about for the day, whether it's working towards being able to eat that meal all together at the end of the night, or have your 5 minutes of iPad time as a child, or whatever it may be. And then I like to say, if you're going to kind of get into the nitty or gritty of your routines, to then pencil in your scheduled events. So if you have certain appointments that you or your kids need to get to, go ahead and write those down. Writing them down, I think, can also be a good way for you and your kids to know what to expect for the upcoming week. And this can be really important for kids, just to kind of have an idea of what's coming, especially when there's so much uncertainty right now. And incorporating your kids is great in this too. That kind of goes back to the communication that we talked about earlier a little bit. So maybe you really need that 10 minutes of locking yourself in the bathroom, so your partner gives your kids those overnight oats in the morning. Or maybe you want to ask your kids what's really important to them that week. Maybe they really need that pajama day that's on Friday that school usually does, or maybe your partner really wants to watch that late night Saturday Night Live. So just kind of communicating with your family on what is important to be scheduled into your routine, and honoring those things if possible. And then finally, I like to recommend kind of zooming in on the smaller segments. Those are the routines. The smaller segments are usually the routines that you're doing on autopilot. You're waking up, you're brushing your teeth, maybe you're jumping in the shower. You're not really thinking, but you know that those are things that you already do. And these are the segments that can be really, really impactful, because they already have some flexibility, but they can allow for us to do something for our mental health at the same time. So for example, maybe you just practice mindfulness while you brush your teeth in the morning, and you just tell yourself, I'm going to think about one thing I'm grateful for in the morning when I brush my teeth. So these are kind of the opportunities for older kids or parents to get in touch with themselves. Or like maybe you're going to reward your kids for eating breakfast before school starts at home, and let them watch that television show. And the final tips that I kind of have for those smaller segments is aiming to wake up and go to bed at the same time every day, which is especially challenging right now, but kind of telling yourself or your kids, hey, we've got 2 rings on the snooze this morning, and that's it, then we've got to wake up. That will help kids kind of know, again, what to expect for the day, and understand that it's okay to be flexible and forgiving during this time, but it's also good to maintain a routine.
Yeah, the sleep thing is so important, and that scheduled bedtime and wake up time are really important for, I think, adults and kids to have that sense of routine, and to be able to function and thrive during the day. I also really liked what you said about kind of looking at it from the bigger picture, and then also that the smaller routines that are just sort of on autopilot. That's a really great point too. So my other question, kind of along with that, is, so once you've built those routines, do you have any tips for maintaining them, or how you can kind of keep yourself and your family on track? Because I think that's the other thing that happens too, is that I know at least sometimes I have some really big ideas, and I'll make a big list of like all of the routines I'm going to do through the week, and then halfway through the week I don't do 100% on all of them, and then it's tough to keep motivation for it. So do you have any tips for kind of how to make a routine a little bit more permanent, and to stay on track, and also what to do if you get off track?
So for getting off track, I always like to talk about practicing self-compassion and letting go of perfectionism, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit, but those are the 2 biggest tips I would have for if you do get off track. And just reminding yourself that it doesn't have to be 100%. 70% is okay. The 70% is still going to get that McDonald's or pizza on the table. It doesn't have to be like this perfectly cooked meal. And then to answer your question about maintaining them and kind of helping the family all get on the same page with them, I think a lot of parents find success obsessed with getting like a giant calendar and kind of stenciling in those big picture things, and maybe those like required things, like you really got to get to that dentist appointment that you've already missed 3 times or whatever it may be. So if you can kind of like put it in writing, pencil it down, and focus on the big things, then you'll know what to expect and you can start to think about the little things. But I'm the same way. I'll think of all those little things I have to do. Like, I'm going to cut all of my kids' sandwiches into cute little Christmas trees for the holidays this week, or whatever it may be. And those just aren't realistic. So just kind of sticking with, okay, these are the realistic things that we are going to get done this week. We are going to all try to go to work and try to go to school, try to get to that dentist appointment. But if it doesn't happen exactly as planned, and we bump that dentist appointment from Wednesday to Thursday, it's okay. You still got it done. And if it's at 70% instead of 100, that's perfect. You can celebrate that win.
Yeah, I think, you know, you mentioned perfectionism, and I think that you're right. That's what's tough, is kind of getting over that, and being okay with, you know, maybe you didn't make, you know, all the sandwiches into Christmas tree shapes, but like you made a really good sandwich. And so that's, you know, that's what's important. So, you know, talking about letting go of perfectionism and, you know, being a key to building routines, do you have any tips or strategies for that?
So long before I even ever became a parent, I remember my mom had a Teddy Roosevelt quote hanging in our kitchen that said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And I really couldn't imagine anything being more accurate to parenthood. So the first thing I suggest is to stop comparing yourself. Most of the time, I think the pressure that we put on ourselves as parents comes from comparison and our own wildly unrealistic expectations. In comparison, most of the time, sometimes it leads to those great ideas like theming your sandwiches, but sometimes it just makes us feel like we're inadequate or we're coming up short. So kind of avoiding that comparison is most helpful, and it's so easy today with the internet and social media. So I always like to suggest, with social media specifically, to try and be informed with it, but not overloaded. So if you're noticing like yourself going down a rabbit hole of Facebook videos about parenting, tell yourself, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes and then that's it. And the same goes for the internet. Like if you're finding yourself Googling things at 3 a.m. about parenting on a blog and reading endless blogs, you know, kind of tell yourself, I'm going to be informed. I want to know what other parents are doing to help me, but I'm giving myself 10 minutes and then I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And then also with perfectionism, just doing what works for you. So not everybody is going to have a perfect routine, and that's just realistic. So if you know if you've worked late 2 nights in a row and you need to do 2 nights of ordering pizza, that's completely fine. Your kids likely aren't going to remember that you didn't cook a wholesome meal every night during this. They're not going to remember if you didn't perfectly fold their socks or stick to that routine, but they're going to remember you just being there and being understanding of the fact that these times are challenging. Also, I always like to recommend being kind to yourself. So this goes hand in hand kind of with self-compassion. So rather than criticizing yourself, show compassion and recognize all that you are doing. A good one for this one to practice is kind of putting yourself in the shoes of a friend. So think, you know, if your friend was calling you and telling you they're doing all these things wrong, what advice would you give them? And then maybe try and give yourself that own advice. So maybe you tell them, practice a little self-forgiveness, be realistic about what you're trying to do, and apply that same advice to yourself. And then finally, just being open to change. We're far enough into this by now that we have to know that being open to change is just so important. So if a routine isn't working, that's okay. Revisit it. Maybe write that giant whiteboard in something that's erasable so that you can make corrections. So if kids would, you know, like with kids especially, if you ask them what's working for you, what's not, maybe they'll tell you, you know, I just want to get my homework done so that I can eat dinner and then play video games or go outside. Maybe you try and be flexible with them and when you're expecting them to complete their homework.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can pretty comfortably say that the only certain thing these days is that everything's a little uncertain. So
Yeah.
I love the idea of a whiteboard, you know, so you can kind of be agile with your routines and, you know, work on, you know, change what's working and what's not, and, you know, use it to set yourself up for success so that you're planning a routine that, you know, everybody's got buy-in on and that they're, you know, wanting to do, and that, you know, works for your family. So those are all really great points. You know, Sarah, I know we're getting close to time. And so I just wanted to ask for a final question, is there anything else that you would like people to know, or like, what's the one thing, the one takeaway that you think is really important for parents to think about?
Just to celebrate your wins during this time. You know, it's easy to blow things out of proportion sometimes, and this is where picking your battles becomes so important. Like if your kid spills juice on the floor in the middle of class, it's okay. Celebrate that you have juice in the house for them to drink. So just really celebrate those wins, and remind yourself of the times that you've been challenged in the past and have kind of persevered, and use that resilience that you know is in you to keep pushing through this. This will end, this pandemic will come to an end. And even if these routines are not ideal right now, if they work for the now, congratulations. You got through a global pandemic, and you hopefully minimize your burnout and set your learners up for success in the process.
Yeah, I love that. You know, celebrate the wins, because there's always wins. So, Sarah, thank you for taking the time to speak with me, and for all of your helpful information. For those of you who are watching this video after it's over, you know, please feel free to message us here on Facebook if you have any questions, and we'll get back to you. And then, you know, finally, just remember that no matter what you're feeling, you're not alone. Colorado Spirit and Jefferson Center are always here for you, and you can give the Colorado Spirit team a call at 720-731-4689 if you need to talk. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.